Well, hey, everybody. My name is Scott, and this is my good friend, Nathan.
Hey, guys.
We have been working through a book called The Other Half of Church, and it's by Michael Hendricks and Jim Wilder. And the premise of the book is that much of discipleship in the Western culture is focused on the left hemisphere of the brain more so than the right hemisphere of the brain. And in fact, one of the authors, Jim Wilder, considers himself to be a neurotheologian, which is a term I've never heard before this book. But since I've been involved with recovery, I've done some reading, not an expert by far. I've simply done some reading on how recovery, the interlap of recovery and neurology, and how those two things play together. And this book hits on both of those topics. So I'm fine. I've listened to the book twice. I've listened to many podcasts at this point from Jim Wilder and Michael Hendricks. And so Nathan and I just wanted to kind of whet your appetite for the book. Hopefully you'll pick it up. That's our goal. And learn a little bit more.
Yeah, this is such an awesome book. You know, we decided to really kind of pull out main points from each of the chapters, and we're hitting chapter 2 today, which is how people grow. And that's why, and I just want to ask Scott, you know, what is the premise of the book? Because the other half of church, you don't immediately go to necessarily neuroscience or how the brain works, right?
Yeah, effectively, the other half of church is referring to how in Western culture we tend to ignore right-brained activities or disciplines or even experiences. And he argues that's actually because the way the brain works is from the back right to the front right. If you can imagine kind of energy flowing in the brain, mm-hmm. or even ideas, it's from the back right to the front right. And then it crosses pretty much in front of your eyes. And then it shifts from the front left and goes to the back left.
Yeah, so we have a picture.
Yes, we have a picture. Go ahead.
We want to show you this diagram because, as Scott is saying, the direction of the brain, you can also see some of the descriptors from the left brain to the right brain as well. So you see on the left, you see things like speech, strategies, problem solving, thought, conscious thought, logic, right? Right side, though, if you look at, these are some of the major things that we struggle with in today's society when you think about mental health. Individual identity, group identity, emotional attunement, or emotional intelligence is how people sometimes refer to it. You'll see at the bottom as well, relational attachments. I mean, all of this is where we see breakdown of mental health, right?
Yeah, and you see at the top, along with right and left, he points out that we know from neuroscience that the right side of the brain actually processes faster than the left side. And so we will often feel things before we even put words to them. And he argues that's because of the speed of which energy and information is flowing in the brain. It actually flows mm-hmm. faster on the right mm-hmm. side. So we'll feel it before we can even put words to it. Mm-hmm. And so in this chapter 2 that we're looking at today, he's asking the question, how do people grow?
Right. He quotes Dallas Willard, who I'm a big fan of as well. And one of the things that Dallas says, which Michael kind of echoes, is the error is believing that thinking forms character. Meaning if you just think about something, if you think, I'm going to grow in patience. Thinking about it doesn't actually grow your patience, right? So that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about the fact that Many times our discipleship reflects only left brain strategies, which he even talks about, in fact, because again, he's quoting something that Dallas Willard says, which he believes spiritual formation or growth into Christ-likeness, that's a very short definition, but is a central task of the congregation. The primary responsibility that Jesus gave us as Christian leaders is to grow our people, right? To shepherd them. And he says, as a pastor, I offered a full suite of left brain strategies, and I didn't even know the right brain skills existed. So, for instance, he offered strategies to learn and resources to learn theology, which is like we just said, it's logic, problem solving, it's thinking. And the next would be Bible study methods, which again, you're learning information, so you're thinking through this. And then you're talking about spiritual disciplines, but you're not necessarily practicing them. You're only talking about spiritual disciplines, which again can be a left brain strategy primarily. And he says, yet the right half of the brain was totally neglected, which results in low joy, shallow relational attachments, unstable identity, and a weak community. So again, I want to read the 4 off again, because these are like his 4 strong points that he's making, which we actually dive into in the coming chapters. Low joy, shallow relationships, unstable identity, and a weak community.
Yeah.
So
and joy is what we're going to dive into in the next session. And I just want to clarify, none of those left brain activities in and of themselves are bad. He's not saying that at all. They're good activities. Obviously, we should be reading the scriptures. We should be memorizing the scriptures. He's saying we often do those things in Western culture to the neglect of other areas. In fact, one that he mentions that he gets into later in the book, which really is convicting to me, is celebration. He says celebration is very much a right brain activity, but in many Western cultures, we don't celebrate very well because of how it's viewed culturally. And so we're missing a way that God has put in us through worship in celebrating, and it in effect limits how we grow as a disciple.
So, this connects with, again, I love that story that we told the last video about the tomato plant, which is, if you're only relying on the same soil dynamics every year, you will not be producing enough tomatoes. Right?
That's right.
So that's what we're getting into now.
Yeah. So hope you can join us for the next session as we will take a look at joy.